This is for the boys. This is for the boys who understand suffering. This is for the boys who have experienced pain. This is for the boys that maybe had a hard go of it for the last few years, maybe your whole life. This is for the boys who grew up in a world where you needed to be strong when things were falling apart around you. And this is a story about suffering and why it's a gift. And it always has been. And it's never been a curse. And to start the story, I'm going to talk about cold plunges. See, cold plunges are a pretty spicy topic these days. And as it happens, I'm a pretty big holistic health fanatic, which means I've dove pretty deep into the cold plunge rabbit hole. And we'll talk about the physical benefits. But I don't do it because of the physical benefits, if I'm being completely honest. They're cool, but that's not why I do it. It's now March of 2025, and I first started jumping in freezing rivers, I believe the winter of 2022. I had met some friends. They said they liked jumping in rivers. I said, what the heck? And so I went, and we went to a river by us. I live in Utah, so pretty accessible, and during the winter it gets fairly cold. It's not like Canada -40 cold. Okay, so for all the people that are just waiting to comment, be like, but it's not, but it's not as cold as our. I'm not saying it's as cold as your cold. Okay, I get it, but it's cold. It's not warm. It's like 5 degrees, 10 degrees, 20 degrees. It was cold. We have long, kind of cold winters. So I went in the middle of a winter the first time. We went to this river. I jumped in. I think I got out after like 45 seconds, and I was like, oh my gosh, it was so cold. But it did something to me. And so almost without fail, every week since maybe November of 2022, so for almost 3 years now, 2.5 years, I've done some kind of cold exposure, like a cold plunge, every week. A lot of the times, especially during summer, it'll be multiple times a week. And recently, I discovered some hot springs like 6 minutes from my house, which, side note, if you're trying to maximize winter and you're feeling sad and mopey, first of all, suck it up and stop complaining and go outside. Seriously. Second of all, you need to find some hot springs. If you happen to live in a place like I live, where we have hot springs readily accessible to a lot of people, or Wyoming, I have a friend that will jump in hot springs in Wyoming. Find the hot springs, and it'll allow you to put your feet on the earth. It'll allow you to ground, relieve a lot of inflammation and oxidative stress in the body, and help rebalance the positive to negative charge. That's a discussion for another day, but use it as a hack. If it's winter, if you're feeling bad during winter, find a hot spring, jump in it. Now, it just so happens, getting back to the story, this hot spring we've been going to is right off of the lake. It's Utah Lake. It's kind of a gross lake, honestly, but I don't mind that much. So what we'd do is we'd get in the hot spring, and then we'd go sit in the lake for 5 minutes, and then get back in the hot spring. And you get in, and you get all like, you get the tingly winglies, and you get this rush. And we do that a few times. And this last month, I was doing that 2 or 3 times a week with a buddy in the mornings watching sunrise, because it was awesome. Haven't gone for a couple weeks to that spot, but we rotate and we recycle. Anyway, as I was saying, I've done it every week with some small exceptions, pretty much every week, usually more than once a week for the last 2.5, almost 3 years. And the experience has changed me. And I know that people will talk about this as me being overdramatic. and saying that cold plunges are my savior and cold plunges aren't da 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 da. I get it. And truthfully, maybe it wouldn't be all that useful for everybody. But for me, it's been life changing. And the reason why is because I grew up so soft. And I don't need someone to yell at me. In fact, I don't like it when people yell at me. It makes me irritated. So those super like aggressive red pill camps where they're just like smashing you into the mud, like, what are you doing? You piece of dirt. I don't want that. I don't need that. But I did need, and I do need, suffering. Not because I deserve it, but because I need to learn how to sit in it. And growing up, I was like a lot of boys and men nowadays, just exceedingly soft. If you listen to the first episode, then you probably heard the story. Like growing up, I mean, I was a chubby kid. I was raised by women who were wonderful women. But the nature of women is that they tend to be risk avoidant, which, of course, in a husband wife, mother father relationship, raising children, this is fantastic because the dad, a healthy high T, high DHT dad, is going to be like, yeah, let's go jump off the cliff with the 3-year-old. Like that's, and so the mom can kind of be the voice of reason, and the dad is the one that'll push the limits. That's how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be this counterbalancing act. When you're raised just by women, it doesn't mean that the women are bad. They're actually doing their job, but they're naturally risk avoidant, which means you, as the boy and eventually the man, or so he would like to be, also becomes risk avoidant. And that's what happened to me. I grew up not taking risks. I I never seriously broke a bone. I broke my toe a couple times, just once. I had some teeny little sprains, but I was never the kid that would bomb down hills on like skateboards. I didn't learn to snowboard or ski as a kid. We didn't go boating. Some of that was because we didn't have money, but a lot of it was because we were just like risk averse. I wasn't the kid that went like cliff jumping. I don't have those crazy stories, that everyone has from when they were teenagers and like, bro, like, yeah, I was just crazy. We were like backflipping off 20-foot bridges. I never had that. Um, I avoided it. I avoided risk and I avoided danger. And most of all, I avoided discomfort and I avoided suffering. And of course, it's natural as a human to not want to experience pain. If you do want it, then you're probably a masochist. Like if you really want it, and that gets into some, weird alleyways, obviously potentially destructive alleyways. But that's not what we're talking about here. For me, it became hedonism. And this is the plague. This is the epidemic of the world that we live in today, and especially and perhaps specifically around men. And it's killing us from the inside out, and it's slowly rotting our souls. And that's what was happening to me. I could feel it. I knew that's what was happening, but I don't think I had the courage to understand that, to embrace it. And so I avoided discomfort at all costs, right? It was like, I want everything that I eat. I want my taste buds to be constantly titillated every second of every day, like sexual pleasure. I don't want to control any appetites. I want to feel it. I want to like get the dopamine hit from my shows, from TV, from movies, from the people I talk to, from everything. It's just more. And the irony of hedonism, I have a friend on Twitter who used this phrase that's stuck with me for months now. And he said, don't get stuck on the hedonic treadmill. And most people don't realize that hedonism is like a treadmill. In fact, most people don't realize that they're walking on the treadmill. But hear me out for a minute. We're going to get back to the cold plunge and to suffering. But we need to talk about this first, because I'm talking about this because it's foundational to what has allowed me to overcome who I was. And accepting this and the principles that I'm sharing, that I'm trying to elucidate in whatever way I'm able, this is what has freed me. And so back to hedonism. You have hedonism, and it's this like almost like biblical word. People don't talk about it, but really what hedonism is the addiction to comfort and convenience at all costs, even if that cost is your soul. Even if that cost is your potential, even if that cost is who you could become, you yourself. Even if that cost is a beautiful relationship you could have, a business you could start, a gift that you could discover and share with the world. Comfort and convenience at all costs. It is selfishness embodied. And the irony of it is that the more you pursue it, the more you want it, and the less able you are to be fulfilled by it. And so it's this awful destructive cycle. It's like a treadmill. The faster, it's like one of those, maybe you haven't used those. There's these curved treadmills. I don't remember what they're called. But the way that they work is that the faster you run, I guess it's like a hamster wheel too. The faster you run, the faster it goes. And then the faster you have to run and the faster it goes. And eventually you gas out and you're toast. You get thrown off or you stop running. And that's what happens in hedonism, and people don't realize that they're on this treadmill. And this is the treadmill that I was on. And there's this book called Dopamine Nation, which is a really excellent book that I would recommend just about everyone to read. But one of the things that is great about it, she talks about dopamine as a molecule, which is a whole nother rabbit hole, frankly, that I need to dive down even deeper. But getting back to dopamine, dopamine plays into this hedonic treadmill because people think that dopamine is the molecule of liking. It's not the molecule of liking. It's the molecule of wanting. And that's good. That's good. For example, the dopamine rush when we get some kind of sexual pleasure is great because that leads us to want to connect with, as men, with women. The dopamine rush when we eat a really tasty meal is really good because that will drive us to then eat satiating, nutritious, tasty foods, which, by the way, good food tastes better than garbage food. If you don't think that, then you don't actually know what healthy food is. But that's neither here nor there. Uh, Actually, it's both here and there, but we'll get to it later. And you get the idea. The problem is when you get into this hedonic spiral, the hedonic treadmill, what happens is that eventually your ability to like decreases and you want the thing more than you're actually able to like it. A really good example of this is pornography. This is why it's so awful. This is why it destroys relationships and hearts. One of the reasons is this pathway that's happening is dopamine. It's more than dopamine. I think that it's actually poisonous down to the soul. But one of the problems with it is that you get on it and you start to want it and you want it more. And the more you do it, the more you want it. But the problem is, the more you do it, the less able it is to give the high to you that it once gave. Drugs operate similarly. And so as this thing goes down, you have this wanting that's increasing, this desire, this craving that will not go away. It gets more and more and more. And the more and stronger it gets, the less able to satisfy it you are. And the bigger this gap grows, the more your misery compounds. You get more bitter, you get more angry, you get more selfish because all you want is to fill that void. And so you look for more comfort and more convenience and more porn and more trash food and more titillating your taste buds and more whatever it is, whatever your vice is, because you want to fill that gap. But the problem is that the more you seek to fill it through hedonic pursuits, through this dopamine hacking, this doom scrolling or gooning or porn or trash food, whatever it is, the more you seek to fill it, the wider the gap grows. And the irony of it is that you escape that not with more, but with less. And that's where suffering comes into the picture. Now, tying this all back, I didn't realize that I was in this loop when I was young. And if I had had this conversation with myself, I don't even know that I would have received it all that well, although I like to imagine that maybe I would have. But the reason that I was in there is ironically because there was a lot of pain that I didn't know what to do with. And I'm not even sure that I knew that it was there. And I don't say this to be woe is me. Like I said in the last episode, and I'll say every time, I have a blessed life and I had a blessed childhood. But I also had a hard time. And growing up without a dad, it leaves this scar of disconnection that you don't realize is there until you get older. And you start to see the deficits in you that don't exist in a lot of other people. And there were times when there was chaos around me and a lot of things hurt. And so I think that I tried to escape that pain. And by the time I was 17, 18, I was 200 pounds, couldn't do a pull up or a push up, hadn't kissed a girl, had no success with women, didn't win at a lot of things. I was good at music, still am. I was smart, but I didn't push myself to be smarter or to learn, really. And the pain of what I had experienced was compounded by the pain of who I had become. And so I ran from it. And I think that's what we tend to do. And so know that when I'm talking about everything I'm going to say today and what I've just said about the hedonic treadmill, I condemn it not just in you, but in myself and in all of us. And I condemn it because it is the roadblock that will stop you from becoming free of the very pain that you're trying to escape. And that's why the suffering is the gift. And so moving forward, you can listen to the last episode, which is the first episode. Last shall be first. About more of my story, but basically we go forward some years, and I was 18 in what I was just talking about, late teenage years. I lost a lot of weight, and I learned to bridle my sexual appetites better. I learned to bridle my physical appetites by way of like food, and I learned, at least somewhat, I learned how to train. I learned how to be in it, but I still found that I was running. And I don't think I could put my finger on what it was, but I could feel something was off. Around 2020 is when my health fell apart. And by 2022, my health was in a pretty good spot. I'm in a better spot now, but it was in a pretty good spot. I felt pretty good, especially compared to 2 years before. I mean, 2 years before, I had SIBO so bad I literally couldn't eat a piece of garlic or like fruit. Carbs. I couldn't digest fat. Half a glass of milk, a slice of cheese would wreck me. I had acne. My joints were messed up. My energy was whack. I wasn't sleeping well. So compared to that, in 2022, I'm sleeping, like putting on muscle. My joints feel good. Like going on some dates. Like I'm having good times with friends. I'm starting to post online. It was cool. I was feeling good, but there was something missing. And I didn't know what it was, but I could feel that I was missing something. And I call those couple years my crucible years. And really, maybe our whole lives are the crucible years. Maybe I'm going to look back and realize that all along the way, I think God gives us breaks here and there. Like it's like a round of jujitsu. Like we're going to do a long round right now, but take a breather. Take a breather before we start again. And then it'll whip you back into it. And I think maybe the more I think about it, life is just one big cycle of our crucible years. That being said, those years, after I fixed my health, I realized the spot that I was in emotionally and physically and mentally, and I realized that in a lot of ways it wasn't great. And in a lot of ways, I was still running in the same way that I had been running when I was a kid and when I was a teenager. And I was doing it in a little bit of a different way than I had before, but I wasn't facing it. And what I really wasn't doing was not facing the things that were truly painful. I wasn't facing the real suffering. Right? I had been like, I'm the aloof guy. Fell into the red pill rabbit hole like, no, not emotions. Like, facts don't care about your feelings. And it's like, okay, all right, Ben. Well, I fell into that rabbit hole, and instead of understanding and embracing and maybe even sitting in those thoughts, the feelings, the struggles, the demons, I had been running from them or ignoring them. And it became my crucible time because I learned that I needed to sit in it. And so enter the cold plunge. I love the freezing rivers, and maybe a little bit is, because I'm a little out there, but why I really love them is because that first time I did it, I was in 30 or 45 seconds. All I could think about was when I could get out. And I remember years and years ago watching a David Goggins video that I thought was stupid. And by the way, I will not tolerate David Goggins' disrespect. Goggins is a G. Moving on. I remember watching a video where he was talking about his SEAL training, and he said that he was in this water, and there's something that they do in like the Navy SEAL. I wasn't Navy SEAL, Army Ranger, I think, training, where they have to tread water, and the water's like freezing, and it's basically just like as long as you go. And he was like, "Yeah, I went longer than everyone else." And they were like, "How did you do it?" And he's like, "Because I wasn't waiting to get out." It's like these guys were, the second they got in, they were like, "Hey, when do I get out? When do I get out? When do I get out? How do I get out? When do I get out?" And so every second they're in there, they're just miserable, just clenched up and miserable. Like, when can I escape the pain? And Goggins was like, "No, no, no. I got in there and I was like, how long can I go? How much longer can I do? Give me more? Awesome. I'm gonna sit in it." And I remember one day, I was probably months into the plunge. I was sitting there and I realized, like, oh, that's why this is awesome. I get in this 32-degree water that hurts. And I understand this isn't the worst pain in the world. Like, I'm not some master fighter. I'm not some dude with some wild pain tolerance, and I don't pretend to be. Like I said, I was a soft kid. I'm escaping that now. But you get in this water, and everything in you is like, why are you doing this? I mean, you're in a river, especially in the middle of winter, right? Like, it's snowing. It's 15 degrees outside. My shorts, our shoes are like freezing to the ground because it's wet. And I'm wading into this moving water that's 32 degrees. And I understand everyone's like, that's so stupid. It's so dangerous. First of all, it's not that dangerous if you're not stupid. Second of all, you get in there and everything tells you that it's stupid. Like, you don't have to do it. You could just be comfortable. You could just sit in the comfort and feel good and get more comfort. And meanwhile, as you're doing it, the gap grows and grows and grows. And I think I realized that I didn't want that anymore. And at some point, intuitively, subconsciously, maybe I realized that if I wanted to be free of the pain, then I needed to embrace it. And that's why I love the river. Because you walk into that river, no one's forcing you. You don't have to do it. You walk in it, your toes hurt from the second you get in. And then you get up to your balls. It doesn't feel good either. and then you just sit down. And it's fun to swim around in the cold, especially in the winter, but I went with someone recently and they were like, "I don't like just sitting there. I want to swim around." And I like the symbolism of sitting in the freezing water, because I get in there and I sit and it hurts. My whole body hurts. I get into my neck too, because the neck is better, by the way. None of the like chest stuff. That's weak. Get into the neck. Put the head in too, but don't keep the head in the whole time because you'll probably die. So like neck. But you get in there and it hurts. I mean, it hurts, especially up here. Your whole body hurts. And what you want to do is you want to panic and you want to jump out. And I'll have people come with me now and we'll jump in and they're like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And then they just like kind of pop out and then they a lot of times they leave. But you know, we give them some healthy bullying. Be like, bro, come on. Just chill out and sit down. And almost every time they get in and they sit down, and depending on the state of your mitochondria, your ability to regulate your temperature, 30 seconds to a minute and a half is about how long it takes for you to reach Zen. And in the meantime, you sit there and you're clenched and you just have to control your breathing. Just little by little, you just control it. And as you're controlling it, you start to breathe slower. And instead of running from the pain, you just sit in it. Literally and figuratively, you just sit in it. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with the idea of not running from it, but just sitting in it. And I have a buddy that he's getting married now, and he's a big time coach for a college team, so he doesn't come as much anymore. But he made this joke when he would get in. He'd get in the first time he got in. He wouldn't care that I tell this story because he's a goof. First time he got in, he got up to his knees, and he had like his timer. He had like his timer on his athletic watch. He got into his knees and he got in down to his chest for a minute. And he started like dry heaving, and he's like, "I can't do it, bro." So he caught up. He went up back to like up to his knees, and he stayed there. And then actually though, every week, took him about 3 or 4 weeks, but every week he got in a little deeper, and by the 3rd or 4th week, he was down to his neck, and then now he'll go longer than anyone else. But he'll make this joke when he gets in. Everyone's kind of got their mantras. But his like half joking, half serious, like, "I am pain. All I've ever known is pain. All I will ever know is pain." He just says it as he gets in. He's like, it's really funny. But mine, when I get in, is I get in, I sit there, and I say, I embrace the suffering. Embrace it. Embrace the suffering. And I close my eyes. And I just breathe. And I sit in the moment. And in that moment, it's painful. And it hurts a lot. Especially if you're coming out of that hedonic treadmill. Because here's a fun tidbit also from that Dopamine Nation book. The less sensitive to dopamine you become, the more sensitive to pain. A different, easier way to put that, the less sensitive to pleasure you become, the more desensitized you are to pleasure, the more sensitive you are to pain. And so what you're going to feel the first time you do something like this is a lot of pain. It's going to be very unpleasant. And even honestly, things that aren't that painful are going to feel super unpleasant for you. And if that is you, you need to take this as a massive red flag wake-up call that there is something seriously wrong with the way that you are living your life, and you need to change it now. And if you don't change it now, you will be stuck in a miserable hedonic spiral for the rest of your life. That's why I love the river. Because it's an entry-level way. You know, you get guys and be like, "Hey, bro, listen, it's summer. It's going to be like 80 degrees outside, dog. We're going to go sit in the river. And we're going to sit in there for 10 minutes. And we're going to bully you if you don't sit in it with us. We'll still love you." And what we even do, there's this place by where we eat. It's called Redmond's. Maybe they won't approve of this message because I said bully, but I don't care. They're really great. They're really clean food. If anyone's in Utah, Redmond's is really great. They didn't pay for this. I just really love Redmond's. They have raw milk and like fries and coconut oil and local food, and it's fantastic. But well, like half jokingly, half seriously, when people come with us, because you got some of the boys now that come every week. When we go in, we get in the river, and then Redmond's is pretty close to one of the spots. We'll jump in the river, and so we'll go from the river, and then we just kind of drop trow and change there by the river, and then drive to Redmond's after the river. And the rule is like, listen, bro, like you can't eat at Redmond's unless you earned it with the river. But the funny thing is, you actually enjoy the food more after you've experienced the pain. That's a tangent. We're wrapping back to the cold. But anyway, that's what I do when I sit in it. I say, I will embrace the suffering. And the more I did it, the more I learned. And it took, honestly, it was probably about a year and a half until I realized that that's why I loved it so much. And that makes me think of a story that a few years ago I had a weird situation, mostly of my own creation, with a girl, and it left me in a place where I was just struggling, not just because of that, but because there was a lot of other things going on in my life at the time, and I wasn't feeling good about where I was or who I was. And this is in the middle of those crucible years, like I was saying, where when you open yourself up to feeling the things and experiencing and maybe battling the demons that you haven't allowed yourself to before, it can come as a flood. And a lot of that did come as a flood for me. And I'm grateful for it, because eventually you learn to build a boat, and then you can move. And I'm sure there will be a lot more floods that I'll have to let loose, and boats that I'll have to build. But for now, that one has been built, and it's let me move in a much better way. But it was in the midst of those years, and I remember one night I was walking alone, which I do a lot. I like walking aimlessly. I always tell people, and I'm dead serious, if I could just walk for 3-4 hours every day with no music, no podcast, no books, just walk, I'd be a happy camper. I love it. And I honestly, a big motivation of mine to become financially free is so that I can have the freedom of time to just walk. And honestly, like, if I have kids, I'll just strap them on my back and walk. And I love walking. That'll probably be another episode. Silence. It's the secret entrance to the world of inspiration that the world doesn't want you to know. Which is why they're always blaring noise in your face, in your ears, in your eyes, in your mind, in your taste buds. You need silence. You need peace. You need space. I was taking that because I had learned to appreciate it at this point. I was going for a walk. I have a little nature trail pond behind my house. And I was walking. I actually remember almost down to the step where I was. And I remember walking, and I was boobing, and I was like, man, like, why is everything hard for me? Everything. I was talking to God, and I'll just be honest here. Like, it was not a fruitful conversation, but it was an honest one. I was just walking, and I was like, why? It feels like I see that, like, I have these other people that I look at, that it's like it came easy for them. You know, like I grew up like, and I wanna be clear that this is not the way that I feel now, but this is how I was feeling. I'm not condoning it, but this is where I was at. But it was like I grew up without a dad, and I had to deal with the demons that gave me. I had to deal with the demons, you know, from my mom, because she wasn't always around, and things that she was struggling with, and my brother, and things that he was struggling with, and and I had to figure everything else. I figure everything out myself. Like I'm built with these joints that always hurt, and the body that is naturally chubby, and I'm not naturally very athletic, and I am super like obsessive, and that has made my personality just addictive, and like I struggle with women all the time, and it's like I'm struggling, and it feels like my life has been one big struggle. Everything like for and I was like, why? I don't understand. I've been trying at this point. Yeah, I've been trying for years to just be better, like be the best to do it, and it's just not enough. Like it feels like no matter what, I just am a struggle, and I don't get it. And and I was sitting in this like, why did you do this to me? Because I've been raised and I believe in a God who is a father and that loves us dearly. It's like I'm trying and it feels like you're working against me. In fact, it feels like you set up everything against me. And it just felt like it was all coming to a head, and it was like all that I want is to just be a good man and have a family and use my gifts to bless the world. And it feels like no matter what I do, I can't get there. And I don't understand why it feels like it's so much harder for me than it is for everyone else. And I was just sitting in that. And it wasn't useful, uh, but it was honest. And I couldn't figure it out. And I felt like I had done and was doing everything that I knew how to do. And it still just wasn't working. And I was frustrated. And it was starting to turn into bitterness. Or maybe it had been bitterness for a long time. I don't know. And I remember walking to the side of this pond. Maybe some of this I was saying out loud. We probably had people walking by me. They were like, "What is this dude doing?" Like he's muttering to this stupid life of dad and my foot, like my legs, and my knee. And I don't know. I was probably, like I said, I wasn't in a good spot, and I was pooping. I'm being honest. I think we all hit those spots, but you should move out of that as quickly as possible, which is what I did, because I remember standing there that night in the middle of that walk, and I sat there and I was looking at the sky, walking, talking to me and to God, considering. And I was like, why have you given me all this suffering? And the answer was, why did I give it to you? It wasn't a curse. It was my gift to you. And it makes me emotional because of how deeply I realize that it was done by a God who loves me so personally. And I sat there. It was like, you've been thinking about this all wrong. And you've been thinking that I gave you the struggles to hurt you or to make you struggle where everyone else didn't have to. It's like, that's not why I did it. I don't care about that. I did it because it's the only way that you could become who I designed you to become. It was the only way. And you knew, and I knew who you could be. And I think that maybe before I was here, I knew that I would need this to do what I wanted to do and what God needed me to do, and what only I could give to the world. and that I could never become who I needed to become in order to share my gifts and my experiences that only I could share with the world unless I had experienced that. And when I was sitting there, I realized that it was never a curse or just a burden to be born. It was a gift that God had given me. All of it. All of the obsessive autistic tendencies and all of the hyper attachment and disconnecting and aloofness and the growing up without a father and figuring everything out myself, learning to overcome my hedonism and my vices. It was a gift. And it was a gift from a God who loved me dearly. I'm a big fantasy fan. Brandon Sanderson, in particular, has some books that just speak deeply to my soul. One of those series is called Mistborn. It's like 3 books, and then it's split by a few hundred years, and then it goes into another 4 books that are like later. It's pretty cool. There's like metals, and they can like push and pull the metals. And then in the second part of the series, they use like guns and stuff. In the first one, they just use coins. So anyway, I'm reading those. This is related, by the way. I'm reading those, and there's this main character, and I think this was actually after. I don't remember. This was after or before this conversation in my head. And I'm reading those and kind of sitting with them. And there's this spot where this main character, he's just had some gnarly stuff happen to him. I mean, some like really gnarly stuff. And he's had to become someone that in a lot of ways he didn't expect. And he's had things happen to him that he has this like deep bitterness for. And at one point he's talking to God. And I'm not giving that much away by saying what I'm about to say, but if you're going to read him and you haven't, I'm sorry, I guess. He dies. And he's like talking to God. And they're talking about this thing that had happened to him. And he's like, why did you let this happen? And God's like, would you have had it any other way? And he's like, yeah, I'd prefer it didn't happen. And it's like, okay, but this person was broken and this needed to happen. And it was going to happen either way. Would you have rathered that I let someone else do it? And he's like, well, no, I should have been the one to do it. And he's like, okay. And as this is going, I'm thinking like, I see where he's going. And basically they wrap it up and Wax, the character, ends up, he's still bitter. And he's like, well, why did you let it happen? And he's like, would you have had it any other way? Would you have let anyone else be the one that did it? And he's like, no. And he's like, then can you stop being so mad about it? And then he goes on and he kind of holds out these options to him. And he doesn't say this outright, but he implies that like in one hand, it's like he moves on, he dies and he rests, whatever. And in the other hand, he goes back and Wax asks like, what's in this hand? And he's like, and God's like, what do you think it is? And he says, duty. And he says, well, if that's what you think it is, he has an opportunity to go back and help a lot of people in a way that only he can. And he says, you choose whichever one you want. And so obviously Wax doesn't choose this one. So he goes to choose this hand and he pulls it back. He's like, are you sure? He's like, yes. And he's like, why? He's like, because I have to. He's like, you don't. You don't have to. This hand is available to you. You could take it. You could leave. You could never experience any of this. And he says, so if you take this hand, you're not doing it because I'm forcing you to. You're choosing to. And he was like, and Wax kind of sits there and he's like, Well, yeah, because I want to help them. And this is the only way. And he says, then go. But can you stop being so mad at me about it? And I don't remember if this was before or after this conversation on my walk, but that hit me so hard that I stopped reading. And I was like, yeah, I can stop being mad at you about it. And here we started talking about jumping in a cold river. People think when I talk about my river plunges that I am just a hippie grounding, cold, fad following fanatic, and they might be right. But that's not why I do it. I do it because it teaches me how to sit in the suffering that will inevitably come as a part of the life that God has blessed me with. And I do it because I know that if I run from that suffering, I can never be who I want to be and who I could be. And that one day I will die knowing that I didn't live up anywhere near my potential and my ability to use my gifts to bless the world. And I can't stomach that. There's this quote by Dostoevsky where he says, "There is only one thing I dread, not to be worthy of my sufferings." I think about that a lot. And so I hope that you learn to suffer, not in a masochistic way, not because you think you don't deserve happiness or joy or satisfaction in your life, but because you accept that suffering is not the opposite of joy. It's just the other side of the coin. We're not here to avoid it. We're here to become and experience. And that suffering is part of the experience. Of course, the benefit of the cold plunge is you get a pretty big drop in leptin, which means, more satiety. It's easier to lose weight, more energy. You get a pretty crazy dopamine hit that lasts. You get energy. It's like nature's crack. Seriously, you get energy all day long. Helps your sex drive. Helps you lose weight because of the leptin. Your body, in warming yourself up, uses uncoupling proteins, is what they're called. They're connected to your mitochondria. And by the way, they make your mitochondria work better through something called PGC1A. Effectively, if you do it right and recover properly, and you're already decently healthy, getting sun, basic sleep, it's a huge plus that helps lose some fat. It helps improve your metabolism, your mitochondrial efficiency. It helps you regulate temperature, and right after you get really hungry. There are a lot of reasons you should get cold and sit in a river, but my favorite is because it taught me to sit in the suffering. And I'm really, really, really grateful for that.